Russian air defenses destroy Kiev's UK-supplied Storm Shadow cruise missiles. Even as the United States and its allies continue to funnel weaponry to the regime in Kiev that has already displayed a willingness to use this hardware against civilian targets, the Russian military keeps showing that it can counter whatever the West provides. While Ukrainian forces tend to treat each new addition to their arsenal supplied by the West as a game changer, their jubilation tends to be short-lived as Russian forces swiftly learn how to deal with these threats. A Storm Shadow cruise missile Kiev recently got from the UK proved to be no exception. Yesterday, Russian air defense units operating in the Ukrainian conflict zone shot down 2 Storm Shadow missiles, as well as several other airborne threats. Air defense systems have intercepted 2 Storm Shadow long-range cruise missiles, 19 HIMARS MLRS rockets and 2 HARM anti-radiation missiles, the Russian Ministry of Defense said in a statement. Also, some 12 UAVs operated by Kiev forces were shot down by Russian air defense units in Russia's Lugansk People's Republic, Donetsk People's Republic and Zaporozhye region. The United States and its allies have supplied billions of dollars worth of weapons and military hardware, including small arms, artillery, multiple launch rocket systems and air defense systems, to Ukraine, fanning the flames of the ongoing conflict in the country and effectively helping prolong the fighting and the suffering of the Ukrainian civilians. Turkey presidential election runoff: who, when, where, what to expect. Turks cast ballots in their country's first ever presidential election runoff on Sunday, which will define who will be at the helm of the country over the next 5 years. Who are the candidates and how should they perform to secure victory? Sputnik has answers to these and other questions. More than 64 million Turks will be eligible to vote in the May 28 election runoff at nearly 192,000 polling stations, including over 6 million who were first-time voters on May 14, when the first round took place. Polls across Turkey are due to open at 8 a.m. local time, 5 o'clock GMT, and close at 5 p.m. local, 1400 hours o'clock GMT. Turnout is expected to be high given that the first round saw 87.04% of eligible voters cast their ballots. A future winner is obliged to obtain a simple majority of votes to secure victory. Election rules stipulate that forecasts and commentaries about the vote are banned until 6 p.m., 1300 hours o'clock GMT, and the media is only free to report on election results as of 9 p.m., 1800 hours o'clock GMT. The High Election Board, however, may allow the media to report on the results earlier than scheduled. The final results from Sunday's vote are expected to be announced by 3 p.m., 12 o'clock GMT, on Monday. Meanwhile, polls for the presidential runoff election opened for at least 3.4 million Turks living outside the country last Saturday. Why does Turkey face a second round? The May 14 presidential election in Turkey headed into a runoff after none of the contenders were able to secure 50% of votes, something that was officially announced by the country's Supreme Election Council on May 15. Our organization decided on the basis of the current situation, when no candidate is gaining 50% of the votes, to hold the second round of the presidential election on Sunday, May 28. This will be for the first time in the history of Turkey, Ahmet Yener, the head of the Election Commission, told reporters. During the first round, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan of the ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, obtained 49.52% of votes, while his main challenger, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, from the opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, received 44.88%. Lagging behind were ATA alliance candidate Sinan Ogan and Homeland Party leader Muharrem İnce, who gained 5.17% and 0.43%, respectively, despite İnce having withdrawn from the race previously. Who are the candidates? The two men fighting it out are incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and CHP leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. 69-year-old Erdogan, who was Turkey's prime minister from 2003 to 2014 and mayor of Istanbul from 1994 to 1998, seeks a third consecutive presidential term in the May 14 election. Earlier this week, he was endorsed by Erdogan in the runoff. The Turkish president previously pledged that if he prevails in the second round, each of the 85 million people of Turkey, the country's current population, will win. Addressing voters, Erdogan pointed out that citizens should not give a hands to those who target the country's unity and solidarity. He vowed that Ankara will fight against all evil networks, including the separatist terrorist organization PKK. Kurdistan Workers' Party and its extensions will continue with determination, adding the PKK could not move in Turkey any longer because of his efforts. Erdogan promised to return about 1 million Syrian refugees to their homeland after implementing housing projects in Turkey-controlled northern Syria. He also stressed that improving dialogue between Syria and Turkey through Russian mediation efforts will help increase the voluntary return of refugees. On the economy, the Turkish president said that he wants to pull the inflation level down to 20% in 2023 and below 10% in 2024, but made it clear that the government would keep decreasing interest rates. In the deadly February 2023 Turkey-Syria earthquake, he pledged to provide quake survivors in southeastern Turkey with home loans within a 20-year maturity and a 2-year grace period. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, 74, made the fight against terrorism one of his key topics during the 2-week pause ahead of the May 28 runoff. Terrorism will be fought, not negotiated. No political and legal arrangement targeting Turkey's national and unitary state structure will be allowed, the presidential contender said. Other topics that he outlined ahead of the first round included the issue of illegal migrants, with Kılıçdaroğlu vowing to create the infrastructure for the process of sending them back to their homeland in 2 years. The 74-year-old also pledged to develop conventional economic policies so as to stabilize interest rates and fight crippling hyperinflation in the country. He claimed that he could attract as much as $300 billion in investment from abroad, arguing that investors only want democracy and confidence in Turkey to inject money. Additionally, Kılıçdaroğlu promised to provide free housing for earthquake survivors who lost their property in the disaster. What about forecasts? One of the latest polls conducted by Center Araştırma revealed that Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu have approximately equal chances to trumpet the runoff victory. According to the survey, 44.7% of respondents are ready to vote for the CHP leader, while 43.7% are ready to support the Turkish president. The remaining 11.6% either have not made their choice yet or they will not go to the polls at all, the poll indicated. The influential Turkish pollster Konda has, meanwhile, revealed that its latest surveys show that at least 47% of respondents will say yes to Erdogan in the runoff, while Kılıçdaroğlu will be backed by 42.2%. About 8.2% have not yet decided how to vote, and 2.6% do not plan to cast ballots, as per the polls. China declining contacts with U.S. military, Pentagon. Washington says it's received no response from Beijing to a request for a meeting between the country's defense chiefs. The Pentagon's attempts to reach out to China's military in recent months have been ignored or rebuffed, Ely Ratner, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, has claimed. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin believes in the importance of open lines of communication with the PRC People's Republic of China, and we have sought to build out those open lines of communication. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of difficulty when we have proposed phone calls, meetings, dialogues, Ratner said during an event hosted by the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington on Thursday. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, along with the head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Admiral John Aquilino and other uniformed and civilian officials, have asked Beijing for dialogue, but those requests were rejected or not answered, he said. The U.S. and Department of Defense have had an outstretched hand on this question of military-to-military engagement, but we have yet to have consistently willing partners, Ely Ratner explained. Dialogue between military officials of the two countries is crucial to prevent misperception and miscalculation and to prevent crises from spinning out of control, the official insisted. In the latest example, the Pentagon's request for talks between Austin and his Chinese counterpart Li Shangfu at the Shangri-La Dialogue Forum in Singapore next week has not been answered one way or another, Ratner noted. According to a report by the Financial Times, Beijing told Washington earlier this month that there is little chance of Li sitting down with Austin in Singapore due to sanctions placed on the Chinese defense chief over his alleged involvement in the purchase of Russian advanced weapons. However, Ratner claimed that those restrictions in no way prevent Li from holding talks with his U.S. counterpart. The ball is in their court at this point, he said. The U.S. and Chinese defense chiefs last negotiated at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Cambodia in November. At the time, Wei Fenghe was China's defense minister. Austin and Li, who was appointed to his post in March, have yet to meet face-to-face. Relations between Beijing and Washington have been severely strained since last August, when U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the self-governed island of Taiwan, which China views as part of its territory. They deteriorated further after the so-called spy balloon incident in February. Washington claimed it shot down a Chinese surveillance aircraft over its territory, while Beijing said it was merely a weather balloon, which had strayed into the U.S. by accident. A visit to China by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, which had been postponed over the crisis, has not happened to this day. Last week, China's top diplomat Wang Yi and White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan held a meeting in the Austrian capital, Vienna. According to Washington, both sides agreed that the incident in February was unfortunate and pledged to re-establish standard, normal channels of communications. Chinese officials described the meeting as substantive, adding that Beijing would continue to make good use of this channel of strategic communication, the state-run Xinhua news agency reported. Ukrainian military starts training in Germany to operate U.S. Abrams tanks, reports. About 400 Ukrainian troops in Germany have started training to operate the US-made M1 Abrams tanks, a U.S. newspaper reported on Saturday, citing a Pentagon spokesman. About 200 Ukrainian troops started combined arms instruction at training ranges in Grafenwohler and Hohenfels on Friday, while another 200 started being trained in tank refueling and maintenance, spokesman Garen Garn was cited as saying. Western countries have been supplying military aid to Kiev since Russia started its military operation in Ukraine in February 2022. The aid evolved from artillery munitions and training to heavier weapons, including tanks. For months, Ukraine has pushed donors to supply fighter jets. It was not until last week that the White House gave its consent to European allies to send Ukraine their US-made F-16 jets, Kiev's fighter aircraft of choice. Germany said it would not send fighter jets but would continue supporting Ukraine in other ways. The Kremlin has repeatedly warned against Western arms deliveries to Kiev. Serbian president resigns party leadership. Aleksandar Vučić will stay on as head of state, with his defense minister taking over the helm of the Serbian Progressive Party. President Aleksandar Vučić has stepped down as leader of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party, SNS, after 11 years in charge, with Defense Minister Miloš Vučević set to take the position. Vučić, who will stay in office as president, announced his decision amid anti-government protests in Belgrade and clashes in Kosovo. SNS delegates accepted Vučić's resignation at a party conference in the city of Kragujevac on Saturday, electing Vučević as his successor immediately afterwards. Vučić assumed leadership of the SNS in 2012, taking over from Tomislav Nikolić. Vučić and Nikolić founded the party in 2008 after splitting with the nationalist Serbian Radical Party. "I will never leave this party, I am proud to have led the best party all these years," Vučić told attendees, boasting of the SNS popular support even amid the hybrid war that is being waged against our country. Vučić said that he will remain in office as president, and that the SNS will join a wider political movement which will be launched next month. Vučić has faced large-scale protests in recent weeks, with demonstrators calling for his resignation and that of his top security officials after two mass shootings earlier this month. Vučić said last week that he had been tipped off to the presence of Western-sponsored activists at rallies in Belgrade, accusing them of plotting a color revolution against his government. Meanwhile, Vučić announced on Friday that he had placed the Serbian armed forces on high alert following clashes between police and protesters in a majority Serb town in the breakaway province of Kosovo earlier that day. The unrest broke out after the election of an ethnic Albanian mayor in a vote boycotted by the town's Serb residents. Around a dozen people were injured after police from Pristina fired stun grenades and tear gas at the protesting Serbs, local media reported. Throughout his presidency, Vučić has sought to maintain ties to the US and EU on one hand, and Russia and China on the other. This has become a difficult position for Vučić, with EU leaders explicitly stating that Belgrade's failure to sanction Moscow over the conflict in Ukraine harms Serbia's chances of joining the European bloc. When Western politicians visit Belgrade, he said earlier this month, their first obligation is to explain to me that I am a jerk who did not introduce sanctions. Vučić has repeatedly stated that he will not sanction Russia except in circumstances where there is no way out. Taiwan reports 33 Chinese warplanes detected around island over past 24 hours. The Taiwanese Defense Ministry said on Saturday that it had detected 33 aircraft and 10 vessels of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, PLA, around the island over the past 24 hours. A total of 33 PLA aircraft and 10 planned People's Liberation Army Navy vessels around Taiwan were detected by 6 a.m. UTC +8, 2200 hours o'clock GMT today. ROC. The armed forces have monitored the situation and tasked CAP aircraft, Navy vessels, and land-based missile systems to respond to these activities, the ministry tweeted. It added that 12 of the detected aircraft, including Su-30, J-10 and J-16 jets, Y-8 transport aircraft, a WZ-7 drone and a Z-9 helicopter, had entered the island's southwest and southeast air defense identification zone. The situation around Taiwan recently escalated again after Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in April, with Beijing launching massive three-day military drills near the island in what it called a warning to Taiwanese separatists and foreign powers. Taiwan has been governed independently of mainland China since 1949. Beijing regards the island as its province, while Taiwan maintains that it is an autonomous entity but stops short of declaring independence. Beijing opposes any official foreign contacts with Taipei and regards Chinese sovereignty over the island as indisputable. Bill Gates' alleged lover linked to Russian spy, Daily Mail. Mila Antonova was an associate of the disgraced sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, documents have suggested. A Russian cards player who allegedly had an affair with Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates several years ago had links to Anna Chapman, a supposed Kremlin spy who was arrested on espionage charges in the United States in 2010, according to a report by UK newspaper The Daily Mail on Friday. Mila Antonova, a bridge player who multiple media reports this week claim had an affair with Gates starting in 2009, was captured in a newly unearthed photograph walking alongside Chapman in New York City. The picture, which is believed to have been taken in 2009 or 2010, around the same time as Gates' alleged trysts with the decades younger Antonova, the newspaper claims. The report adds that Antonova was an associate and financial beneficiary of the late financier and convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Details as to the relationship between Antonova and Chapman, the daughter of a former KGB officer and who was deported from the U.S., remain unknown. The alleged affair between Gates and Antonova came to light this week following a leak of Epstein's records to the Wall Street Journal. The Daily Mail states that there is no suggestion of wrongdoing by Antonova and that attempts to seek clarification on the issue from Gates' representatives this week have been unsuccessful. The emergence of the photograph comes days after reporting which suggested that Epstein had made threats to expose Gates' alleged affair with Antonova, which is said to have occurred soon after the pair met at a bridge tournament in Washington, D.C. in 2009. In 2017, years after Gates and Antonova had ended their alleged affair, Epstein emailed Gates asking to be reimbursed for school fees that Epstein had paid for Antonova to attend a computer programming course, the Wall Street Journal reported citing documents the publication viewed. The WSJ added that the tone of the message was that Epstein knew about the affair and could expose it, and that it came after Gates refused an Epstein request to join a financial venture he was involved in. Chapman pleaded guilty to U.S. charges of conspiracy to act as an unregistered agent in 2010 and was deported to Russia that same year as part of a prisoner exchange deal between Washington and Moscow, along with 9 other Russian nationals who had also been accused by U.S. authorities of espionage. Antonova, who is believed to be 39, currently resides in California. Offering NATO pathway to Ukraine led to war, Kissinger. The veteran U.S. diplomat has clarified his shift of rhetoric on Kiev joining the US-led military bloc. Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has explained how his views on prospective NATO membership for Ukraine changed between 2008, when the bloc first acknowledged Kiev's aspirations to join, and today, after the stream of Western military aid transformed it into the best armed country in the region. I'm in the ironic position that I was alone when I opposed membership, and I'm nearly alone when I advocate NATO membership, the veteran politician told a Wall Street Journal contributor in an interview recorded days before his 100th birthday. I think the offer to put Ukraine into NATO was a grave mistake and led to this war, he explained, yet claimed that the scale of the conflict, and its nature, is a Russian peculiarity, and we were absolutely right to resist it. But after Washington and its allies turned Ukraine into the best armed country in Europe, it clearly belongs to the US-led military bloc, the former official stated, reiterating his firm belief that peace in Europe cannot be achieved without Ukraine and NATO. Back in 2008, NATO declared that Kiev would join the bloc, but did not specify when that might happen. Russia, which sees the bloc's eastward expansion as a major security threat, had singled out Kiev's growing push to join NATO as among the main reasons for launching its military operation in Ukraine more than a year ago. Kissinger drew the ire of Kiev last year when he suggested that Ukraine should accept a return to the status quo ante, or relinquish its territorial claims to Crimea and grant autonomy to the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, in the name of peace. In an interview with the WSJ he went as far as to claim that the Ukraine war is won, but said any peace terms are unlikely to include Crimea. For Russia, the loss of Sevastopol, which was always not Ukrainian in history, would be such a come down that the cohesion of the state would be in danger. And I think that's not desirable for the world after Ukraine, he said. The US-led bloc is already waging a proxy war against Russia, and Kissinger, despite his vast experience, is totally wrong to suggest that Ukrainian membership in NATO would guarantee peace, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said earlier this month. Medvedev, who currently serves as deputy head of Russia's Security Council, said that until the Ukrainian nationalist regime is dismantled it won't give up on attempts to regain lost territories. He argued that Moscow would have to reply harshly with all available means, which would likely trigger NATO's Article 5 collective security provision and help to kick off a wider conflict. Anti-China bloc tests AI-powered drone swarms. Washington, London, and Canberra tested the UAV's abilities to detect and track military targets. The US, UK and Australia have shown off new AI-powered drone swarms, marking the first-ever collaboration on autonomous UAV technology between the members of the AUKUS Security Pact, described by officials as a way to counter China. The Allies carried out the three-way capabilities trial late last month in Wiltshire, Britain, where they achieved the live collaborative retraining of models in flight and the interchange of AI models between AUKUS nations for the first time, according to the US military. The work saw the initial joint deployment of Australian, UK and US AI-enabled assets in a collaborative swarm to detect and track military targets in a representative environment in real time, the Pentagon said in a statement on Friday. Formed in 2021 as a way to deter China in the Indo-Pacific region, the AUKUS Pact has repeatedly come under fire from Beijing. Under the Pillar I of the deal, the United States pledged to furnish nuclear submarine technology to Australia at the earliest date possible. Hosted by the UK's Defence Science and Technology Laboratory. The drone tests were conducted as part of Pillar 2 of the AUKUS partnership, which calls to develop and provide joint advanced military capabilities between the three allies in order to promote security and stability in the Indo-Pacific region. The Chinese Foreign Ministry insists that the new military initiatives will only motivate an arms race, damage the international nuclear non-proliferation regime and harm regional stability and peace, urging the three members to stop ignoring the concerns of the international community. While officials have not offered extensive details about the UAV trials, the British military said they involved more than 70 military and civilian defense personnel and industry contractors, who tested swarms of Blue Bear Ghost and Boeing/In situ CT-220 drones. UK forces provided several tanks and armoured vehicles for the demo, while private contractors supplied a number of self-propelled howitzers and Soviet-era BMP vehicles produced in the former Czechoslovakia. The gear was used to test the drone's ability to track military targets on the battlefield. This trial demonstrates the military advantage of AUKUS advanced capabilities, as we work in coalition to identify, track and counter potential adversaries from a greater distance and with greater speed, British LT. Gen. Rob Magawan, a senior Defence Ministry official, said in a statement. The Australian military stated that the tests achieved several world firsts, including the live retraining of the drone swarms in flight. Russia also sees the West's expansion of its military presence in Asia as a risk that could lead to prolonged conflict. I cannot imagine the great Asian civilizations towing the line the way the EU unfortunately did, and obediently delivering Washington's agenda, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in March. Moscow says will further support Belgrade in efforts to protect its rights, sovereignty. Russia will continue to support Serbia in its efforts to protect its legitimate rights, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, Yuri Philipson, director of the 4th European Department of the Russian Foreign Ministry, told Sputnik. We will continue to support Belgrade in its efforts to protect legitimate rights, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. We have no reason to question the stability of the Serbian government when it comes to the protection of state interests, the diplomat stated. Any decision on Kosovo should be acceptable for Serbians and approved by the UN Security Council, Philipson also stated, adding that the West is trying to promote other ways to solve the issue with no regard for interests of the Serbian people. On Friday, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić brought the Serbian military to a state of maximum alert due to the situation in Kosovo and Metohija over unilateral steps taken by Pristina. He also demanded that NATO urgently stop violence against Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija. The reason was an attempt by the authorities of Pristina to appoint Albanians as mayors in the north of the province after the April 23 elections to local self-government bodies in the north of Kosovo, which were boycotted by local Serbs. Beijing to boost dialogue with all parties to Ukrainian crisis including Russia. Beijing will boost the dialogue with all parties to the Ukrainian crisis, including Russia, and make efforts to reach a political settlement, Chinese Special Representative for Eurasian Affairs Li Hui said. Based on provisions of the document China's position on the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis, Beijing will continue to boost cooperation and dialogue with all parties, including Russia, and make real efforts for a political settlement of the Ukrainian crisis, Li said during the meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, as quoted in a statement by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. The Chinese ministry stated following the meeting that Russia and China would continue to increase bilateral and multilateral cooperation in various areas and enrich their relations in a new era. In February, China released a 12-point document entitled China's Position on the Political Settlement of the Ukraine Crisis, which underscores respect for the sovereignty of all countries, the cessation of hostilities and the resumption of peace talks between Moscow and Kiev. Russian President Vladimir Putin said that some of the provisions of the plan could be a basis for a peace settlement, if the West and Kiev are ready for it.